G'day everyone and welcome back to Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al. I'm really excited to kick off 2026 with you. We've just finished our first full calendar year of podcasts and I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's listened, shared an episode, sent a message or stopped me for a chat. I genuinely appreciate it. This year we're aiming to bring you even more great guests with plenty of practical conversations you can take straight back to your own operation. We'll be featuring more local producers too. People right here in our region who are doing good things, having a crack, who've got great stories worth sharing. I'm also pleased to say that we've got some regular voices returning. Chelsea from Herd Solutions will be joining us on a monthly basis with veterinary updates and timely animal health advice. And Morgs from Elders is back as well, committed to a monthly livestock market update to help us make sense of what's happening and what it might mean on farm. So whether you're listening in the ute, on the tractor or in the yards, welcome back. I'm glad you're here and I hope you enjoy what we've got coming in 2026. All right, welcome to Digging Deeper. We've got PJ here with us all the way from Texas, America. But you opened up with a cricket reference and your accent is not Texan. Tell us where you're from, PJ.
So I'm from the Eastern Cape of South Africa and moved to the US about 13 years ago. So based in Fort Worth, Texas now.
And what are you currently doing?
So probably a bit too much, to be honest. I work with a company called Trans Ova Genetics, mainly working with embryos. The company makes about 600,000 embryos a year. We're slowly moving into the Australian market as well. And then I've got a consulting business where I consult on commercial beef and dairy operations, some seed stock operations.
Is that your independent business?
Yeah, it's called Global Livestock Solutions. So that keeps me traveling quite a bit, and I judge a lot of shows and speak at events, and just pretty much anything to do with cows and bulls.
Yeah, well, I've hardly met someone that's more well-travelled in the cattle industry than you, and we're actually at the Sykes' property at Mawarra. They're hosting an event here, and you're the keynote speaker, and Diane came up to me and said that you've been over nearly 80-odd countries, is that correct?
Yeah, geez, it's 123 now, I think.
Right.
Different countries. It's kept me busy, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, two questions then. Why cattle? Where did you start in cattle?
It was from conception. So I was fifth generation on our farm, beef cattle, sheep operation, and it was an absolute obsession from the start. So I didn't really ever think I wouldn't be in the cattle industry.
So early days in South Africa farming cattle, what did that look like compared to what you're seeing now?
I'm grateful for growing up in the area we did. It was an area full of a lot of Scotsmen, like 1820 settlers that had come from mainly Scotland and other parts of the UK. It's just a line of really strong stockmen who instilled a lot of principles in me from a stockmanship standpoint, just a cattleman standpoint. And I honestly, even with the exposure I've had in North America to a lot of their principles, I think I probably still lean in a lot heavier to what we were taught growing up in South Africa.
And is anyone still on the family farm?
I've got a lot of cousins and uncles still on the farms. I sold our farms when we moved to the US and moved my mom to the US as well. My dad had just passed and I didn't want her alone. We were 50 k's from a town of 200 on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. So I thought probably better that she comes with us.
And what were your farms like? Rainfall, soil types?
High altitude, so about 1,600 meters above sea level, hot, dry summers with like thunderstorms. So we'd have a lot of powerful thunderstorms, get about 18 inches a year, and then pretty cold winters. Like our winters, we would frost pretty much every morning, but we could, as we got into August, it could dip below, minus 10, minus 15 type weather. So healthy climate, really dry, not much trouble with parasites and all that kind of stuff.
So what sort of breeds of cattle?
So I had Hereford, Angus and Red Angus on the family farms, and then I had a property developing company, or a property developer who had a big company up in Johannesburg, who I partnered with pretty soon after university, and he had Brahman and Braford. And so what ended up happening is we were running cattle on 5 different properties, 2 in South Africa, 2 in Namibia, and 1 in Mauritius. And I was the working partner moving between those properties every month. And I think that's what got me more intrigued with running cattle in different climates and environments and different, cattle economies, different cultures. And there were just so many different ways to do it. And it really sucked me in.
Well, that's one thing I think that we noticed listening to you is the stuff that you can draw on from all around the world has been really valuable for us to hear. One of the things I really liked, and you mentioned it as part of your consulting business, that you went for a trip to a little island.
To the Seychelles.
Yeah,
Yes.
do you want to share that with our listeners?
Yeah, so it was the first ever international consulting that I did. And I was mid-20s at that point, and got invited by the Minister of Foreign Affairs to Seychelles to come and consult on the biggest cattle herd in the Seychelles. And he had me booked for 7 days, and I got there, and the first morning was spent with his herd of 22 cattle
on the largest herd.
The largest herd in Seychelles, and overlooking the Indian Ocean. And I pretty much exhausted everything I knew within the first 3 hours, and then the next 6.5 days was spent touring the islands and seeing the beaches, and it was a pretty good experience there. I really liked it.
The one thing you did mention though is that you were looking at how they farm their cattle, and they were walking them in and out every day, and you made a suggestion it's not the best thing for them, but what was the response?
Well, I was trying to teach them, they were bringing their cattle into individual stables every night. And I just said, guys, you're wasting energy and resources, and you really don't need to do this. These cattle are much happier sleeping out in the pastures. And then that's when the guy schooled me and said, well, what do you think our main profit driver is, or income driver is? And said, well, they're beef cattle, so it must be beef. Excuse me, this grass going to seed has suddenly gotten me. But so he said, no, the main profit driver was every morning all the hotels and resorts would come and scrape the manure off the concrete, and they'd use that for their vegetable gardens and flower gardens. And so that's why they had to have them in stables every night. And then they also used the bulls to pull carts in on some of the islands where you're not allowed to have motor cars. They use the bulls as beasts of burden to crush coconuts, and they milked the cows, and eventually at the end of their lives they would process them for beef. And I think that's where I learned that you need to listen before you talk, trying to still apply that.
2 ears and one mouth, my mum used to tell me.
Yeah, that's quite right.
Now, you mentioned some of your heroes, and it's probably not what we typically think of heroes are. Who are your heroes?
So I grew up quite inspired and intrigued by 2 music artists, one called Chris Christopherson, like an old outlaw country music artist, and one called Johnny Clegg, who is a South African folk singer. And I still lean into those guys quite heavily, just in their songs and what they wrote. A lot of non-agricultural thinkers, guys like Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Yuval Noah Harari, and I think what I would definitely advise, well, any people, but younger people coming into the industry, is you need more than one teacher. You need to get your knowledge out of more than one industry, and within that industry too, you've got to have more than one teacher just to mold your mind philosophically, and just to teach you how to think, and to how to organize your thoughts. The danger with having just one mentor, one teacher, is you end up becoming part of a tribe, and tribes become cults, and eventually you isolate yourself from the rest of the world, and you lose out on what other people are doing and thinking. So yeah, it is a non-traditional list of of mentors and influences, I suppose. But I've always been interested with people that are passionate about what they do, even if they're not in our industry.
I think the other thing that I picked up on too is that you're not afraid of controversy or having a different opinion, but then even people that you don't align with, you can still quite easily respect them for their field.
Well, a lot of those guys I don't align with or agree with on a lot of stuff. You get a lot of black eyes and blood noses from that approach. But also, you're not wondering anything ever. You can, and I think one thing I've always enjoyed doing is being friends with people that disagree with me. Like, not just on a subject, but like people that disagree with me on like the very principles of what life's about. It's interesting. Like it makes your brain work, when you're having to really refine what you actually think about stuff all the time.
Yeah, I think in Australia we're not very good at that. We just see insult. Growing up in South Africa, do you think that's something to do with that thicker backbone maybe?
There might be something. Australia's a lot more monoculture, and I think part of that is why Australia is as strong as it is, because you've got a culture, where South Africa's 11 cultures commingling, and they see things totally different from each other. But one thing that with South Africa's issues, whether it be corruption or crime or whatever it is, the one thing that I've really enjoyed and missed about not being in South Africa as often as I'd like to be, I still go back 6 times a year or 5 times a year, is that South Africans know how to laugh at themselves. And I think part of it is because there's always another culture making fun of you, or another group of people making fun of you, and we learn to laugh at ourselves, because it is a bit of a crazy country, and you do learn to laugh at yourself.
All right. Well, now you've just talked about this, so you're probably going to be a bit over talking about it, but you mentioned the 8 divisions of a cattle operation.
Yes.
For our listeners, can you explain that analogy just briefly?
Yeah, so I'm going to use the wheel, if that's okay. So basically, a functional wheel with 8 spokes works best if all the spokes are the same length and evenly apart. And that allows that wheel, to roll in a forward motion in a comfortable way, and moves the machine or vehicle forward in a very functional way. Now, in a cattle industry, those 8 spokes would be genetics, herd management, nutrition, animal health, marketing, record keeping, forage management, and then human capital, human resources. And my thought process there is, and this is coming from my own experience, I was very bad at a lot of that stuff. And my grandfather was actually quite good at all of it. But the difference I realized there was that if you're doing it yourself, all 8 of those things, you can actually not perfect it, but you can master it. But growth becomes impossible.
It's limited.
Yeah, there's too much attention to detail for yourself. Now, what I moved towards, and this allowed us to grow, was putting specialists in place so that every one of those 8 disciplines had someone that was specialized in that discipline, looking at it, whether it was from a consultancy standpoint or someone that you referred issues to continuously. But as long as every one of those 8 bases are covered, you've got a pretty good chance of being profitable. The minute you ignore 2 or even one of them, literally all the issues can come in through that gap. And it's been a while. I've been using that since 2008, I think, that model, and it's really worked for the herds that I consult with, just in making sure that they're paying attention to every one of those 8 disciplines.
Now, have you found in your work that what you're passionate about you're also good at, or do sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect there?
Well, I think you put enough energy into your passion that you become good at it. You might not be naturally gifted, but just the amount of time you spend on it, it sets you apart from your peers, right? So, yeah, I think it's difficult to become good at something that you're not interested in. People do it. I mean, there's some really good accountants that don't like accounting, but they've forced their way into it. I guess I'm just weaker. I wasn't prepared to spend too much time on stuff I didn't enjoy. You know, I was all in on the stuff.
What didn't you enjoy on the
admin? I'm a shocker. Like with admin, which is funny. Like with my admin for the herd, I was good. Like calving records and getting all the data ready for the bull sales, and I was good at that. But just normal, like paying bills and invoices and building proposals, just awful. Absolutely shocking with that kind of stuff. But that's when you get people in who are good record keepers to do it for you,
Yep. Now, you mentioned you came out straight away and said you have a bias in the cattle industry. What are your biases and why do you feel that way?
So my bias is towards the cow-calf producers, so that the primary producers who are literally producing calves and selling them on for beef, either at weaning or as big bullock steers. The reason for that, okay, I mean, the obvious reason is that's we were, so that's where that stems from, the genesis of it. But the more I've traveled around the world, the more I've seen that when the primary producers get ignored, it doesn't only affect the food security of the country, it also affects that country's centralization of power. So it doesn't allow power to be decentralized through small towns and communities across the country. That weakens a country. A centralized country is not a country you want to live in. It becomes tyrannical. It's all the issues that come with bad countries happen once a country becomes centralized. And farmers, agriculturalists are unique in terms of being able to decentralize power, because a small town doesn't flourish for a long time without agriculture. Mining towns come and go, but agricultural, that's what makes a small town flourish. Now, if all the profit is going further down the chain to the feedlots and then the processors, and it's not at the primary producer level, that's a dangerous situation. I think we've got to find better ways to be profitable at primary production level, so that money stays in those small towns and all those small communities. Because honestly, in a lot of countries, the primary producers have been subsidizing the links further down the chain by producing a product that makes money in feedlots and for processors and for retailers, but not necessarily for themselves.
So you just mentioned subsidies then, and we don't normally get political on this podcast, but where do you sit with subsidies in agriculture?
So the danger with subsidies is that hook can be used, the same hook that pulls you up the hill can be used to pull you down the hill. Because in order to get subsidies, you've got to tell the government exactly what you're doing and how much you've got and what your plan is, and they can use that data, that knowledge for good or for bad. What I have found is that the countries that aren't subsidized, the cattle countries that aren't subsidized, have better, more profitable, more functionally efficient cattle, bar none. I mean, the heavily subsidized countries, let's go to Western Europe, British Isles, I mean, awful. The cattle are so terminal. They've lost their fertility traits. They're not functional anymore, heavily subsidized. And even when I go and speak there or judge there or do some consulting there, to try and get it across to them that the government will subsidize a good cow too. You don't have to have bad cows to get subsidized, becomes a problem. And I think the minute you start relying on free money, your incentive to do a good job disappears. That seems evident in livestock anyway.
It's a point that I hadn't thought about before. When you mentioned it today, it really did show that it's one thing that we've got to be careful with when we put our hand out.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's a hook that sometimes drags us down. Now, there's just another couple of things here. One, which I haven't heard about before, but I'm going to get the terms wrong, but sexual dimorphism versus sexual monomorphism.
Yes.
Can you explain what you mean by that and why we've got to be conscious of it, I guess?
So basically, we really need to try and propagate sexual dimorphism in our herds, and that is extremely masculine bulls and really feminine females. Bulls and females that are not the same size and shape and look different. That's the natural state of mammals. Like mammals, males and females are not the same. That is incredibly important for reproduction, and fertility is the number one profit driver in a cattle operation when you're evaluating the cattle themselves. Sexual monomorphism is a phenomenon that's crept in the more we've selected for maximum growth, maximum muscle, maximum marbling. So we're selecting for terminal traits, propagating growth hormones and neglecting sex hormones. And the way that works is the growth hormones the long bones only stop when the growth hormones have stopped, and that's when the sex hormones can start. The longer you delay the sex hormones, the bigger and more extreme the animals get and the less fertile they get. So it becomes antagonistic to fertility. So we've tolerated feminine bulls and masculine females for a long time. And when you go into some of the big popular herds now, you can't find the bull in the herd. You know, he looks like the cows. And this is a severe knock on profitability, because the only way to correct fertility without sexual dimorphism is by pouring feed to them. Because they need that, they need that energy, and they don't have it in themselves, that fleshing ability, which comes from sex hormones. So you have to get it from feed. The feed companies love it because they're selling you feed that you can pour to them. But it really just takes your profitability away when you've got to rely on an energy source from outside the animal instead of from inside the animal.
Yeah, and what about people that are worried about growth rates in their steer portion? Is that something that will slow down if we...
Maybe a little bit, but you're still going to have a product that's marketable, and it's still going to be more profitable because your cows are going to be calving on time every year with minimal input. So that balances itself out. I think there have been a lot of numbers thrown at how much more important fertility is than growth when it comes to economics. The lowest paper I've ever read on it is 4 times. So fertility is 4 times more important than growth. So whether your steers grow as big as they would have is 4 times less important than whether your cow's calving every year on time.
Yeah. We just completed a fixed time AI at the research farm recently, and we were putting the bulls out, and the AI tech said, "What do you want to do? Make money, or be able to tell which is AI?" And he said, "Put the bull straight out, because an empty cow is an expensive cow." So I agree there. Now, EBVs, we're at a genetics day at Mawarra, but what's your slant on EBVs in the cattle industry?
So I think if I'm going to be very diplomatic, in their purest form, they are actually a well-oiled machine, and they can work. But there are a lot of factors that have to come into play for that to work. So everyone needs to be measuring everything all the time, accurately, honestly, in large numbers in the same environment. That's the first issue.
That's a lot to get right.
Well, that's what makes the machine work. The second thing is the way those EBVs are being interpreted is we've got some breed societies, some marketing companies that are really promoting the extremes. They're publishing trait leaders. These rankings were never supposed to do that. They were just supposed to tell you what genetics are in your cattle for each one of those traits. So what that does is it further encourages breeders to swing for the fences and breed for extremes. If my clients do want to use EBVs, this is the way we use them. We breed for fertility, so back fat and scrotal circumference, because that's inherent body condition and hormonal balance. Okay, breed for that, and we breed against the negative outlier of every other trait. So we don't breed for low birth weight, breed against high birth weight. You don't breed for high weaning weight, you breed against low weaning weight. You don't breed for low milk, you don't breed for high milk, you breed against low milk. And you end up with a balanced, average, profitable animal. So yeah, they are a tool, but unfortunately they've been elevated. They've been treated like the product, but they're not the product. They're a tool to make the product, and somehow they've taken on product status, and there's more attention given to them than the product itself.
Yeah, so you just touched on that there, but you said quite a few times that average is good.
Yeah.
Why is average good?
Average is profitable because your balanced animals that are fertile and have got enough of everything but not too much of everything, they're not going to drop you. So when you go too high on growth, it's going to be antagonistic to fertility. Too high on milk, antagonistic to fertility. Too high on muscle, antagonistic to fertility. So when you pull that down to the average and you're selecting for fertility, you've got a profitable animal.
Right. Anything else on this presentation? Because we rushed through the very end in the day. Is there anything else that the listeners might want to hear that you didn't quite get time for before Jen had to wrap you up?
A lot of it was really going into how to evaluate livestock phenotypically, for functional efficiency, which we did in the practical part of that. I think, I think to sum it up, it just comes back down to balance again, and finding that physiological balance, the balance of the endocrine system, the balance between fat and muscle, and then the hormonal balance. And honestly, that is where profitability lies. Not always cash flow, but profitability.
I really enjoyed our short chat. I know you're tired, you've got a flight to go and catch, but we always ask one last question. I've put you on the spot, but we're often learning things, but not always we're surprised by the things. What's something recently you've learned that surprised you?
That is putting me on the spot. Goodness, I've learned a lot of interesting stuff lately. Let me think. Does it have to be cattle related?
No. We once had a vet say that she learnt that echidnas live to 40 years. So.
Okay. Yeah. I think I've learnt that maybe being flexible in terms of allowing yourself to change your position and change your mind, and I know I did speak about this a little bit today, is actually quite a freeing thing, and it actually is better for us. That if you take a position where you're inviting and you're happy to not be proven wrong necessarily, but to be shown that maybe your way of thinking on a certain subject wasn't right, that you can allow yourself to change direction on a certain subject without having to feel that it's a negative fact that you've flip-flopped. This is a more recent thing for me, that I guess to sum it up, we're not obligated to be who we were 5 minutes ago.
Okay, so
we're allowed to change.
Can you think of a time when recently you have changed your mind from 5 minutes ago?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. After having kids, my whole take on socialized healthcare changed big time.
Yeah.
Before that I was like, everyone should pay their own way, and why am I subsidizing everyone else? And then you get kids and you're like, geez, it actually makes sense in a civilized country to have socialized healthcare, and I think in the cattle industry too, I'm learning more and more that there are so many, not right ways, there's so many possible ways to do the same thing. That hardlining it and being dogmatic about any part of the cattle industry can actually not just leave you isolated, you can become ignorant from it. Where understanding that there's so many different ways to do each of these disciplines, it frees you, but it also, it allows you to get into a lot of pretty awesome situations when you're open to hearing of, just alternative ways.
No, that was a really good one, and I know that everyone was here has really gained a lot of valuable information, and has been inspired by you being here, so appreciate you coming to this day, and good luck with your rest of the time in Australia.
No, I loved it. And Alistair, thanks for this chat. Sorry I have to run, but I've enjoyed it. It was a good, fun crowd.
Yeah. No, we'll have you back for sure if you're ever in the country again.
Would love it. Thank you, man.
A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.